Okay, lovely. Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to the user group meeting for today. So I'm going to just kick things off just with a little bit of kind of scene setting and a few slides, and then hand over to Daniel, who's going to take you through some product, just little short demos that we've got lined up for today. As Sarah said, if there's any questions, then if you post those. And we'll get to those primarily at the end, but if it's any kind of small points of clarification that required as we go, then we'll try and cover those as we go along there. So, okay, so in terms of the agenda for today, then I'm going to just start with a little bit of an introduction, just for those perhaps not so familiar who we are and what we do. The kind of main areas of business that we're focused on. So the breadth of those areas I'll just cover. And then just a little bit about SpectrumE, the product, the overview of that, just so that you understand what it's made up of. There's some different modules there, and so we've then got a product demo that Daniel's going to run, which is going to give a little flavour of some of the elements. Obviously, there's much richer feature set that we won't have time to cover today. But as Sarah mentioned, we've got additional webinars that we've got planned over the next few months or so, where we'll pick some topics of interest. But please give us some feedback on any areas. If there's something you've seen a little bit of today that you want a bit more detail on, then we can either look at having that as a separate webinar session or a one-to-one session, to go through those details. Okay, so firstly, who are we and what do we do? So was a good place to start. So we're spectrum management specialists. So anything really that spectrum management is our kind of key focus. And the organisation Spectrum Centre is the unification of the former ATD offices in the US, UK, and Brazil. So that's where we've come from. In terms of the areas that we're looking at, so it's off-the-shelf solution, our SaaS product, so software as a service solution. So this is SpectrumE, and that has a number of elements to it, which I'll cover in a bit more detail, but essentially spectrum engineering, remote measurement, and e-licensing. Those are kind of the three core bits. Now, let's say that's the off the shelf, but like everything, there's often some customization. So we do the modified off the shelf, and that's looking to adapt, obviously, just to customers' individual needs, whether that's small changes or slightly more significant ones. But the flexibility of the platform allows that, in quite a quick time frame. So that's good. Allied to that, we also have professional services, which we've been running over the years and continue to do so from consultancy. So different projects that we get involved in, measurement drive testing, development of custom software across different sectors, both in sort of the civil and in some of the military areas as well. So that's really our sort of main focus around the sort of spectrum management and that speciality. In terms of those business areas that we provide to, so obviously key regulators, national regulators, but that's also spectrum management organisations within countries, whether that's as I say, civil or military as well, manufacturers, systems integrators. So really kind of quite a breadth of different areas that we cover, right through to consultants who would then be looking to use our products for their purpose as well. So to say just a flavour and a snapshot really of some of those business areas that we're involved in. Okay, so the main platform that we have is SpectrumE. So this is a web application, so browser-based application that we'll talk about a little bit more. And as I say, we've got a demonstration that Daniel's going to take us through. So I'll cover a little bit just about some of the key features of SpectrumE, and obviously some of those benefits that you will able to leverage as a result. And so we'll then talk about just a little bit about the technical analysis and looking at the product demo. So the spectrum management solution we have is a browser-based application. So it's a kind of client-server architecture. So the nice thing about that is that we've got the power that resides generally on the server. So we can take advantage of obviously of having a powerful server, whether that's located on premises or in the cloud. And the Spectrum E has three main modules. So there's the e-licensing module, the technical analysis module, and the remote monitoring. So they can be sold separately, but they're a common platform. So that there's they're integrated together. So if you wish to have all of those or just one of those, then it's the same common platform that we've got there. And one of the key bits of that does allow is it does allow some interactions between what we call external and internal users as well as the system. So we're not going to cover it today, but for example with e-licensing, then that allows you to from a web portal perspective to have it integrated with an external user that comes in, maybe starts a license application that then gets taken through, looked at by an administration, technical analysis, other administrative checks, in a workflow situation through obviously to producing out in an e-licensing case. Then the product at the end is the license that comes out at the end. So we're not going to cover huge on that today, but say if that's of interest, we can cover something separately on the e-licensing. So in terms of the application, so spectrum management, the desire and drivers behind a lot of Spectrum E was to kind of simplify things, make things easy for the end user. With that in mind, then it's a web-based application. So all you need is a web browser, just one of the modern web browsers, and that allows you to have it on a mobile device as well as a traditional PC, across different platforms as well. So whether it's Macs or Windows, as long as you have one of those more modern browsers with HTML5 compliant, then it's you're able to run Spectrum E. And you can see I've just got a couple of little screenshots on the right hand side of the form factor. So this is on a mobile device, but you can see obviously there's a responsive web design there. So when we run through the demo, then obviously it will be the same platform, but obviously you can see it, so it would have responded in terms of different ways with form factors to make it manageable on a mobile device, and that's all done simultaneously and instantly. So there's nothing to do for the end user. From a security perspective, then we've got SSL, socket layer encryption, and from kind of vulnerability testing, then that's done to. So it's a secure solution that's used by government and organisations, and in a couple of different ways. There's in terms of deployment options, so you can work online, and that's the sort of the off-the-shelf product in the cloud. But there's also the ability to have an offline capability as well. So that's maybe hosted in an intranet style manner, or it could be purely standalone as well. Now, one of the key drivers in designing the Spectrum E platform was looking at performance. So really try to eliminate the need for onerous, long-winded training sessions, which particularly is a challenge for organisations. You have people that obviously move in and out of roles and having to upskill those all the time. Taking weeks to do that. It's just a long time before people are productive in terms of their jobs with tools. So the idea of Spectrum E, and this is what we see, and we have feedback all the time, is that it's easy to use, it's quick for the users to adopt and get using it and become productive with it. So that's one of the real benefits. And that common look and feel between the modules again, facilitates that. There's no additional learning to use from a different tool within a product set. Also with that, with performance, we've got the ability to have true, genuine multi-core parallel. So the way that SpectrumE works is that it creates what's called these task orders, and then each of those is for, let's say we're running a coverage simulation. So that's actually placed out, and then we have the ability to move each one of those task orders automatically off to multiple cores. So you can have each one of those executing on however many cores you've got. Particularly ideal would say if you've got a multi-core server that you're running, you get significant performance benefits of having those, whether it's technical analysis, interference analysis, whatever it may be, running in a quick time. And lastly, just the standardizing for simulation. So another key bit here, which was always a challenge, is repeatability. So consistency of results, and the platform allows that to happen. So if you're running the same simulation today in 2 months' time, then we're not looking at variability on kind of PC configurations and spec that will change your results, which is particularly important when customers are looking to maintain that consistency. And that's really just leads me into this just a little short bit here about really some of the productivity benefits that this has been able to achieve. So the example here that I'm just going to mention was looking for Anatel in Brazil, who's the regulator, and with the big sporting events that they had 2014 and 16. So we had SpectrumE that was deployed into the organisation, and you can see that there was understandably a ramp up in terms of the number of applications, technical analysis that they had to do. So these blue lines here were the kind of the incoming requests, and you can see here when we've got the red line. So as the system was deployed, and you can see it, and then it became widely used, that the actual time for the analysis is significantly dropping. So even in these periods when they had a high number of technical analysis, the actual time to do those was reducing. Now, the benefit of that is then in terms of staff numbers, they could have a small core of staff that were doing that. They didn't have to bring in additional extra staff and consultants to handle this extra volume. And they also have this as an ongoing challenge for things like Formula One and Carnival. So they're able to run this. And importantly, as I mentioned just previously, standardizing in terms of the approach and the results that are coming out at the end of it. So just as I say, a small little example here in terms of productivity benefits, which is really where we see some significant gains with SpectrumE. Okay, so lastly, just to introduce a little bit on the technical analysis, and then I'm going to hand over to Daniel. So in terms of the off-the-shelf engineering function, so there's a whole range of different technologies that we've got that are handled. So from point-to-point technologies, point to multi-point broadcasts, and we're going to cover a little bit on the broadcast this morning, right through to satellites. So you can see there the breadth in terms of frequency range and also technologies. In terms of some of the constituent elements, different propagation interference models from kind of key organisations, the ITU, CEPT, FCC, ETSI. So those are all integrated within the tool. The other nice thing about the platform is that we've got the support for the data anywhere in the world. So whether you're on one side of the globe or the other, then we've got terrain and clutter data that allows you to run simulations, typically around about 30 meter in terms of the resolution there. But we also have the ability, and I think Daniel's going to just give a little example this morning of some higher resolution data as well. So this is circa 1 meter data as well. Okay, so that just a little flavour there. I'm going to just hand over then to Daniel, who's going to take you through and just show you some bits in the product.
All right, thank you. All right, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Paul. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm going to go ahead and begin. I don't want to kill you guys with PowerPoint, but one more PowerPoint to go. So Just want to give a little bit of an explanation on what we mean by spectrum management made easy and how that relates to the offering that we're um, um, distributing at the current time. So to us, we see the spectrum management process, there are discrete steps where you need to perform a technical analysis or connect to a measurement device, we looked at it in a more holistic manner. The idea is to optimize the productivity of an actual process that a regulator or an enterprise type customer may need to accomplish. And so this is an example of a license application workflow. Today, we're not going to go through this whole workflow. It takes a little bit of time to go through it in detail. We're only going to focus on the technical review component. But at any time, if you guys want a demo on this process and how it works and how we would, let's say, receive an incoming application and validate it, or how we would update the frequency database, or how we would calculate a fee or issue a license, or even do something like connect to a measurement system, we can always create other one-on-one presentations in person or remote. And as Paul and Sarah mentioned, we will have more demos in the future. So the system has a way of taking in incoming requests and help automating the processing of it. And there's a business rule engine that comes with the platform, particularly the licensing module, that we resell. It's fully documented, and the customer can leverage that. And we can also customize it as well. Oftentimes, this process is not standard. It's a little different. Sometimes the billing part comes first. Sometimes the technical review part for certain services is kind of eliminated, etc. So it's a very highly customizable system. And as Paul said, that usually lends to what we call a modified off-the-shelf adapted type delivery. So that's all, no more PowerPoint. And we'll go into the product demonstration. So I'm going to run a little bit of the demo online just to show you how the online access works and how you, if you don't have an access spectrum, how you can make a request for access. But most of the demo I'll run offline, mainly to illustrate the point that Spectrum has no online dependency. I think this is a little bit of a confusion when people think of web applications that you need to have some sort of an internet connection. At no point at any stage, not for the licensing, not for the activation of the tool, not for the analysis, not for anything, do you need to connect to any external server, or not necessarily even outside of your own computer. A lot of our enterprise customers have Spectrum deployed in their own environments, in their own data centers, and we have a lot of customers that run it right off their laptop as well. So that is part of the purpose of running the demo offline today. So if you don't have access to Spectrum, you know, current customers should have access to it. You can submit a request here. If you just go to spectrum.center, click on the request link, enter in your information, email address, and first and last name, and you can request what module, what aspect of Spectrum you'd like to trial. We don't let people trial the remote measurement aspect simply because we have limited sensors. We can demonstrate how that works, but you know, having too many people pinging the sensors starts to overload them. So, but we have some brands that we can demonstrate to you, show how we connect with those. Those are pretty much the common manufacturers in this game. We work with them all. So just send us a request if you don't have an access already, and if you do, then you already know what to do to access the system. So once you have your request enabled, you'll have an option to set your password. We use email for the username. We can make exceptions to that, but we do need to have some sort of a user registry to enable your access. So here I've got my access all enabled, and just click login. And one thing I skipped over very quickly, but as you can see, we have the secure socket layer encryption. So that is included in the online version, of course. We do regular PCI certification, payment card industry vulnerability testing to make sure that, you know, there's no phishing, there's no obvious way to hack on the online version. And the online version, of course, has its own redundancy and its own kind of security and quality assurance included in the pricing. Offline versions, we do internal OS testing to make sure that the system isn't vulnerable in an offline deployment. But obviously, that can also incur some customized testing and some customized security measures depending on the customer's IT environment. So if you do want to leverage your own deployment, we can help you setting all that up. That's no problem. But it is important to understand that if you do your own deployment, there is, there's some considerations that have to be made there for security. So here you go. I'm logged in. I'm a system admin. When you guys have your logins, you won't necessarily see all the modules that I have. I have kind of a unique demo module, demo access. So I'm going to have a little bit more than what you might have. But right off the top, I have manuals. There's documentation that the users can look at. There's antenna pattern libraries. There's external resources that can help users learn how to use the tool. There's some calculators as well included. So if they need to do some conversions, coordinate conversions, look angle calculations, power conversions, signal strength conversions, etc., you can go ahead and leverage those features. As I said before, you can download Spectrum E and run it offline. There's instructions for downloading the web stack and the mapping data. Pretty straightforward. So there's a few different options. You can copy and paste the web stack, takes a little longer, or you can run it, run an installer. Also, you have ability to view a spectrum chart, and you can do it for different regions, different countries. Authorized users can also edit the spectrum chart. They can apply filters. They can compare, if I open this in a different browser, I can compare two different allocation charts between each other. So it's pretty simple to use, but I don't want to focus necessarily on that today. I want to just get into the actual demo of the product. So this is the online version, as I said, and you also have the ability to run offline. So I'm going to switch to offline for the moment, and you'll see I have an admin access. And by default, I'm going to the map page. I'll get there in a minute. But here I'm at my home dashboard again, slightly different set of options here, but that's customizable to the user, and that's how I've set it up for this presentation. So I can access a number of features in here. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to go through the set of top menus up here. So I have first well, actually before I do that, I want to highlight the ability to log in with a different profile. So while we're not going to do the e-licensing presentation, just wanted to show how the system will scale and the functions will adapt itself to like a user role and permission-based access. So here I created a kind of this external user example, and in this case you can see this user doesn't have any access to any of the engineering functions or any of these other tabs or the map tab. He, interestingly enough though, does have this option that says organization, where he can act on behalf of someone that wishes to do business with a regulatory organization and can commence a licensing process. So you see I've had a few that I've sent out. One was accepted under study, one was rejected. On another time, we can show you how that works, how a user can submit a request for a license, for a link, for an FM station, for land mobile radio, for equipment type approval, and more. But I just wanted to highlight that how the access can change based on the permissions that are defined. So I'll go back to my admin role, and let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the data store view. So I have, what is a data store? A data store is simply a view to a database. So we have a number, I have as me, my user, my profile has access to a number of data stores. I've got the FCC broadcast database, I've got the BRIFIC, and I can add more as I wish. I've got several others for user management and other things. So right now I'm going to do a little presentation using the ITU BRIFIC, in particular the FMTV tables, and we've created a view here. And what we're going to do, and this is going to the point of spectrum management made easy, is if we were, imagine we were in a technical analysis stage of a licensing process, one of the first steps would be to create your pre-existing electromagnetic environment and analyze the proposed station against that environment. So I'm going to create that using a typical type of query that a lot of our customers use, and we call it a frequency and distance-based culling. So this is where you will define, let's say, a center point in a radius, or this can be a polygon, or this can be a different set of criteria, but one common is center point radius. So we'll go out to 200 kilometers, let's say. And you'll see I filtered through this 200,000 records list very quickly. So if I were to undo that, see how fast that went. So that's one of the things, actually, customers that we've seen, just doing these simple queries has been very painful for them. And we want to enable a lot of that, make it as easy as possible, not let people get kind of stuck with the non-functional complexities or obstacles of their tools and not having to go in and dealing with how to import and export stuff. That stuff should be, the preparation of the simulation environment should not be a big hurdle. So I've identified 3,100 emissions that meet this criteria, but maybe I want to add to that a frequency range. So here I can, if I want, I can, right now I'm only viewing a view of 30, but if I want to view all 3,194, I can just increase my view here, and I will eventually, it will update in about a second. There we go. And I can see all 3,194 emissions that meet that criteria, which I'm not going to go through all of them. It's just to make the point. But my GoToMeeting menu bar is blocking me. Here we go, get it out of the way. So I'm going to maybe say that's a little too much. I don't need to understand all that. I want to add another frequency criteria to this particular query. So I'm going to add in, using a very basic syntax, bracket and pipe. So I'm going to put minimum value here. Let's say I want to start at 87. I'm going to focus on the FM band, not the TV. And I'm going to put a pipe and then out to 108. So I add that to my search criteria, and this should update. There you go. So I've got 1,184 records that are meeting this combination of criteria. And I could add more criteria depending on what's in my data store. And all data stores are a little different. So that's the other thing. With our solution, we're not making it simply an interface or all about the database. We understand in spectrum management, the database is going to change. Every customer, or any enterprise for that matter, whether it's a large operator or a service provider or a regulator, they're going to have different ways of storing their information, and they're going to dictate that methodology or that approach or those techniques to the vendors. We will not be able to impose our architectures in terms of data storage and information management to the customer. So this is one notable change from, let's say, what's published publicly through some open recommendations. Spectrum management is not about just the database. That's an important part, but the vendor has to adapt themselves to how the customers manage their data and how they work. It's very rare that a customer will just accept an architecture, accept a data structure that's imposed to them. So in the future, we can show more examples of how we pull in data, how we create data stores and stuff like this. And feel free to schedule that with Sarah, or contact any of us if you want to have more information about that. So this is, let's say, the pre-existing electromagnetic environment that I'm willing to analyze. So I can simply select all these stations. I have them all in my view, and I can send to map, and I can choose to send to my FM incumbent. So let's go ahead, okay. So they should be there. So I should have the 1,184 stations here, and they're on my map. It took me right to my map interface. And if I zoom out, you can see here they are all over England, all over Great Britain. Now I can also view, underneath there is terrain data. I can see I have terrain for the whole planet, and this is at 30 meters. And I can change the orientation of my view. There's no limitation there. So people working in region we call IT region 3 or Eastern Hemisphere, Far East, they can create these views. We actually in the US have a customer, the US government, that likes this view because their Navy and Coast Guard kind of monitor the entire Pacific Ocean. So it's a very unique view that at least in other parts of the country you usually don't need to see, but we of course work with customers that need to see that. I can also display my clutter. So let's zoom out here a little bit. Oops, I think I zoomed up. So let me go ahead and go to one of these stations here and map it so I reorient my map. It's a quick way to orient yourself. You kind of get lost panning around. But here's my clutter. We have that for the entire planet as well. And I have conductivity data as well. So these are the basic calculation layers needed to perform coverage propagation analysis in pretty much any frequency band. And for low band HF skywave, we also have the different databases from NOAA, from the US government, Australian government included. But again, we won't focus on that for today. So I'm going to switch back to my map view. And one other thing that I may want to change is maybe the display of my objects. So I can control that as well. So here I have my objects displayed. Right now I'm showing the call sign. Maybe I want to hide the call sign of my proposed station, my FM object, and display the frequencies of my incumbents, and maybe make their object size a little smaller. So go like that. Here we go. Now I can see the frequencies that are assigned in the area. I can go back to the display option and I can change the color, etc. if I wish. So if I want to make them blue, for example, you can update, and now they'll be blue objects. I think you can, a little tricky to see them now that I made them so small, but you get the point. And there's many more options here in the display features of the map interface. I can import vectors, I can import shape files, KMLs, I can import polygons, I can draw polygons, I can use all that as necessary to benefit a particular analysis. And we can go into that more in a separate presentation as well. So one thing I'm going to jump to right now, just to go into online mode, simply because it's going to have a little more computing power. I wanted to show coverage over high resolution using a interesting and a more modern propagation model known as 1812. So here I have some LiDAR data. As you can see, I have a photo view, and I have that option as well to pull in satellite, high resolution satellite photography. I can do that online, and I can actually do that offline as well. There is a web map service call to some public resources that can be toggled off if the user doesn't want to make any calls outside of their environment, of course, or if they don't have any internet, they won't be able to do it. But whatever gets eventually connected to can get downloaded in cache. So for example, right near in my offline mode, these are cached maps, images that I have from, I think we're using Mapbox at the current time, but it can be any free resource. So anytime I'm missing some data, it'll just cache it really quickly, as you can see. So here I'm using some aerial photography. So I'm going to do just a quick demonstration. Oops, I'm going to go to the network tab here, and this is where I see the display of my radio objects. And you can see I have a number of object types here. I have no particular limitation really to display any kind of radio technology. So we're focusing, right now I'm going to model a generic TXRX type radio object, transceiver, and I have this object right here, LiDAR, and I have a host of propagation models. One thing you'll notice is depending on the object, the features change to make it a little easier for the user to know what to apply in a particular analysis. So when I go to microwave, for example, I don't need, for example, 1812 maybe. I maybe need different set of models. Same as if I pick another object, then I might not need 452, for example, or maybe I do, but anyway, that's the point. So first I'm going to make a profile between 2 points. Let's do with the 1812. And here is without any of the DSN data in the view. If I want to include that into the calculation, I simply say include the clutter heights, and whatever is at that location I will be able to include in my calculation, and it'll include that in the path calculation as well. So you have a whole link budget output as well, and you can modify that on the fly as you just saw. So I'm going to go back here, and we're going to create an 1812 coverage. So I'm going to first create what we call a path loss matrix. So the benefit of doing that is when I run my path loss calculation, I can display it any way I want afterwards. It can be field strength received, dBU units, or dBm, power received, or power flux density. I don't have to constantly redo my analysis to display it in a different way. So I'm going to go out to about 1,000 points. It's going to be a very short range, quick example. And I'm just going to ask the tool to use high-res clutter in the analysis. So I'm going to run it. It should be done in about 20, 30 seconds. It's a little bit of a more intense computation, as you can imagine, but it doesn't take too long to complete. And one of the reasons I picked the 1812 is it's one of the more modern propagation models that has come out recently from the ITU, and it has been designed to work with modern computers and using modern, more relevant type of digital surface model information that's becoming more and more readily available at very low cost, if not for free, through various government outlets for various parts of the world. So that didn't take too long. That was pretty quick. You can see when the path loss calculation is complete. In the path loss matrix column, it'll tell you how you ran the simulation. So I'm going to go down to the part on coverage. So I have various options for outputting. These labels can all be customized as well. As you can see, I have tooltips that tell me what each option can mean. Again, making things a little easier for the end user, so we don't have to depend on constant trainings and retrainings, and customers don't have to worry about losing those kinds of investments. So I'm going to do a talk out power received, and I'm going to call him, this is my LiDAR, and we'll call it 1812, and one station. So here you go, and you can see in this particular output, it is obeying the information. You have this kind of canyoning effect because of the presence of the buildings. And I may be able to see this a little better, a little more clearly here in the 3D. So I have a 3D button here. One thing we did is we tried to remove the dependency on the right click for a variety of reasons. Obviously, Mac users don't necessarily have right buttons on their mouse. And more and more the browsers, the context menu is kind of starting to overlap whatever right-click menu option we'll have. So Chrome, Mozilla, etc., they're really using that right context menu for themselves. So go ahead and do a little 3D display. And here we go. So you can see I'm taking the LiDAR data into account and got the coverage overlaid on that. So I can adjust this legend if I wish. If I wanted to, I can change that. Maybe I can make it a little bit shorter if I want, maybe raise the threshold. And I can also make custom palettes as well. So I have the ability to create, I have here a variety of custom palettes, create palettes. There's no limitation in that respect. So I'm going to go back to my make 80. But most of you that use tools are familiar with those functions. I'm basically highlighting the ability to do that all through a browser. So there's no limitation, as you can see, in modern web browsers. So I have, oh, that's not the one, this is the one I think. I did the same simulation for 10 stations. So here you can see it took me about, I think about under 5 minutes, but for a demo that's a little long for a live presentation. So I wanted to have that calculated ahead of time. But I can overlay that on the terrain data, and I can see here that it is using that LiDAR data in the calculation. So 1812 is a pretty good model for that. And it's been optimized to run pretty quickly, and it's not hanging, not crashing. So that's pretty good. So I'm going to get off the online access, and I'm going to go back to my local here, and I'm going to, so we did the example of importing the stations all over. I have this pre-existing electromagnetic environment. So now I know what I want to compare and how, what I want to analyze against. And so maybe now what I want to do is simply take one particular interference case and compare the two there. So I found here my proposed station and my potential victim that I'm going to run an analysis against. So I'm going to hide those incumbent objects because I don't really need them at the moment. And so I'm only interested in these two, and I might enable their labels. So call the call sign here, or actually let's do it by frequency. There we go. And so here we go. I have 89.9 and 89.6. So there could be potential adjacent channel interference. I already ran coverages for them, so I'm going to just redisplay the coverages. I did also use the 1812 model. So here is the coverages, and you can see this is a 5 kilowatt transmitter down here. It's my proposed station, the 89.9, and there could potentially be overlap between the two. I have different ways to view that overlap, but maybe instead of viewing it in many different ways, I just want to produce an interference result and get a kind of a straight answer. So the tool has a variety of interference criteria depending on your radio object. So I can always get the interference criteria that is included in the tool and coming from different sources. And obviously for FM, one typical international source would be the 412. So here I see the typical 412 protection criteria that's applied to the tool. So it's good to know what the tool is doing when it does an analysis, and it's very easy to see that in Spectrum-E. So I have a 412 map function. I'm going to click on, if I click on that, I'll just produce my interference result. And here we go. I just have to enable the view. Here I have a history of predictions that I can pull up at any time. You guys may have noticed that I was doing that during the presentation. And there we go. So we see here it's highlighted the coverage area, we'll call the service area of the potential victim in green. And then in red, it's an automatic palette that gets enabled. It's highlighting where the service area may be getting interfered with by the proposed. And you can see that is a little bit, and it would be up to the regulator to determine if that's tolerable or not. But it's very easy. So again, spectrum management made easy. We're not trying to have customers get stuck too much in the weeds with the non-functional limitations of their tool sets and their systems, but to be able to get from point A to point E reasonably simply, to have permission control, to allow users with authorized capabilities to execute the type of functions that they need to execute, and also limit them from doing things that they're maybe not authorized to do or shouldn't be doing. So that's pretty much it for me. I hope this went well. I'm sure there are probably several questions. So with that, I'll let Sarah start to field some of the questions, and we'll try and answer them.
Okay, great, thank you. If you do have any questions, do drop them into that questions toolbar, and I'll take them as we go and put them to the presenters. Just before we do go on to questions, there were just a couple of things as a follow-up from that. As I said previously, you will receive a recording link from today's event that will be sent out separately. I'll also be sending you a survey for feedback. Feedback to us is really, really important. They help us put together the content for this event. Customers, what you want will drive how we put together our program for the webinars and user groups to come. I'll also be sending you an early bird invite for our next user group meeting, which is on the 3rd of October. Okay, just going to slip over now to questions. So the first one to come in was, does Spectrum-E include an API? So does that Spectrum-E include an API?
Yes, it does. It sure does. That's a very good question. So we didn't highlight that, but all the functions in Spectrum-E can be called by through an enterprise service bus, and we have a documented API here. I can highlight it. So I think this is on my offline mode, but it should work still. So you can see here's the documented API dictionary. If I pick on, for example, one of the more popular functions, get coverage, the dictionary will describe all the input parameters and for the different models, and including eventually a list of error codes, expected results, and we have some auto builders that customers can test, you do need to have user access and a token. Token is for unlimited customers. So if you have a Spectrum Unlimited purchase, you can get a token, and that will allow you to create calls to our web service. It can run offline, and you can call our, so we have customers that just call our service online, and then they output the results like a KMZ into their own custom interface. And we also have customers that do this offline in their own internal deployments as well. And we have several examples that we can illustrate to a customer or anyone that's interested in that and how that would work.
Okay, thanks for that, Daniel. I hope that answered your questions, Mark. Okay, and then on to the next question. The question there was about the 1 meter LiDAR data that you use there. How do you import that sort of data into the software?
That's a good question. So we do have tools, internal tools. Fortunately, there's not an fully automated way to convert the LiDAR data today. We'd like to work with LAS files, LAS files, and there's a little bit of subjectivity with the conversion of the LiDAR data. Spectrum uses all open format data, so when we do convert it, it is easier if a customer wishes to reuse that data in another tool because they're just JPEGs and PNGs. We don't really, neither does the internet, believe in too much binary proprietary formats, meaning internet, I say web browsers is what I should say. So open format is kind of the way to go. That is a big part of Spectrum that we didn't talk about much, but everything in Spectrum is open format. So we have internal tools and experts that convert the data. We can train people to do it, but that does take a little bit of practice. And we can share our tools and our techniques with customers. We have a few that have taken that workload upon themselves, and we've helped them. But a lot of customers just prefer us to convert the data for them. So they'll help us, or we'll work with them to identify a source for this data, and we'll do the conversion work for them.
Thanks, Daniel. I hope that helped, Richard. On to the next question. Does Spectrum E support directive antenna patterns?
Yes, I didn't have the chance to go through that. We went over very briefly that you have obviously all these antenna references and formats, but if I were to have gone into the parameters box of any of these objects, you'll see I have a library of antenna formats here. And on another occasion, we could show how to assign a directive antenna or how to pick it from a catalog. You have a catalog option in Spectrum E in antennas here, and I can see a variety of different antenna features, omnis, collinear, RPEs, etc. So, yep, several options. But again, we can talk more on like how the tool can take in antennas for microwave, for public safety, mobile radio, for broadcast, for anything. HF including, that's a very particular area of antennas, expertise, the HF antennas. So all that's supported with the tool.
Just to add to that a little bit, Daniel, is the ability to actually bring in your own antenna patterns. So there's a number Daniel just showed there within the library of the antenna patterns that you can look at. But if you have a specific antenna that you want to bring in, then there's details on the format. But that's it's really just a textual based antenna pattern. That's so it's easy to see the structure and then just replicating that. And there's some details under the documentation section from the home tab that you can find some details.
That's lovely. Thanks for that, guys. I hope that helped, David.
Just to mention that, I know we've asked about.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that. Hopefully that answered your question. We have got a question here. Perhaps I think something you mentioned you were covering in a forthcoming event. That's about automating coverage calculations. Is it possible in Spectrum E to automate coverage calculations and or auto approve e-applications? Daniel, if you could put your audio on, please.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I was playing with the mute button. So yeah, automation. Yeah, we have customers that do that. A lot of customers that, let's say they need to run coverage for 5,000 BTS sectors. And obviously you don't want to babysit a process like that. So there are functions for that, absolutely. And that is a very unique type of thing. The propagation modeling is a little different in those cases because of the workload, but because Spectrum is designed to leverage multi-core processing where you're not launching different instances of the platform to do your analysis or breaking up, let's say, your network into multiple projects, so to speak. Every request is organized into a task order. The task orders can be assigned to cores. So if you have enough computing resources and using the optimizations in the platform, you can do let's say 10,000 BTS sector coverage in a reasonable time, like an hour or so. So we have had customers that actually do that. We have customers that use our API actually for that. They batch coverage there. We have some customers in the IoT area, LoRaWAN, that batch the coverage calls to our API online and produce that in their own GUI. So no problem with that. And we can go at another point and do, I just didn't do the automation of like the 10 stations. It would have taken like about 4 or 5 minutes, but in a demo, this kinds of controlled environments, you want to move along a little bit. So I had preloaded some of the coverage for the multi-station examples, but yeah, no problem there.
That's great. Thanks, Daniel. I hope that helped us. Okay, next question. Is it possible to investigate interference in microwave networks in Spectrum E? So that's interference analysis in microwave networks.
Yep, no problem. That's a whole other little webinar, but what we try to do is simplify the interference setup process. There is in Spectrum E the ability to define your own C2I criteria. So you've got like a custom C2I criteria option in the tool where, let me bring up, let's see if I have custom C2I map. I think this guy here, for example, I can create my criteria, my co and adjacent channels and thresholds, and I can work with MF, SF. And the problem is a lot of our end users get lost there. They don't really know how to define their criteria. So they kind of just want to click on one button and then click interference, so to speak, according to a standard. So if I go to microwave, for example, I do have that. If I would have created a link, I have this, T is interference to and interference from. And it's based off this kind of a standard, essentially. It's a TIA standard, TSB 10F, which will automatically perform the interference criteria and auto-configure all the settings and so forth based on T2I and C2I ratios. User can get into the weeds in the tool and change those criteria as they see fit, but yes, you can. And this is done for maybe thousands of links at a time. So if we have customers today that do that, they'll import maybe 10,000 links and run 10 links against a spider web of other links, and they'll do it in a matter of minutes. So again, another maybe a good subject for another demo, but we're happy to set that up.
That's lovely. Thanks for that, Daniel. Vasil, I hope that answers your questions. Okay, another questions about employing the system on local install. How is the software updated if you've got a local install?
So every customer has to have an online account to get updates. So we highly recommend that the customers use their online account for testing purposes. So when they have, this is not always possible, of course, but if they can, we ask the customer to upload their network to the online account so our end users can test the issue and identify if they're missing an update or not. And through the download Spectrum E option here, we date the updates and we can indicate, okay, you're missing something in your web stack, or your Apache is out of date, or your antenna database needs to be updated. And so we can just notify them. And in the future, we're going to have kind of auto notifications set up for those registered users so they know when there's specific updates. And they would only update that aspect of the platform. So you don't have to update your whole thing, your whole stack and everything all the time. You just need to update the relevant part. It could be a database or whatever. So that is the idea, is to go online, get the update online, and then there's instructions on how to load that into your local environment.
Okay, thank you. I hope that helps, Richard. Okay, another question. If we have mapping data specific for their country, how can that be imported into Spectrum E? And I think this is something we covered earlier about the high resolution data.
Yes, we have many customers that bring mapping data to us. So customers who are familiar with us when we were ATDI know that there were tools that were offered for converting mapping data, and ATDI Inc., now Spectrum Center Inc., was the developer of those tools. So we're very familiar on how to convert data. We have developed tools for that in the past. We have our own tools now. And if you have mapping data from another format, from another vendor, that's no problem. We can convert it. And like I said, Spectrum is open, so what we would deliver to you is an open format data set that you can even open and edit and paint if you want.
Lovely. Thanks for that, Daniel. I hope that helped. Okay, so we've got a couple more questions here. Just bear with us a minute as we scroll through them. They literally have been piling up. Okay, so we've had a customer come back again with regards to access to the trials. So if we could just go through that access to the trials again.
No problem. Anyone that's interested in a trial, all you got to do is go to spectrum.center, click on the request access button here, put in your name, last name, first name, last name, email address. That's very important. And select what you want to trial. And if you're not sure, you can just say request information. So if you want to trial the e-licensing, if you want to trial technical analysis, if you want to trial multiple things, just say, I want to trial all this stuff. Or if there's something you don't see covered here, then just enter in what you want to trial. And we can enable that access for you, and then organize a webinar to coach you through the tool. And usually that's no more than an hour or two to get someone up to the point they can test out the tool properly and get a good idea of what it's capable of.
Okay, thank you for that, Daniel. That's great. Nick, I will be in touch and we can arrange for a demo so that you can have a look at how that works and how it compares to the legacy tools. Okay, I think we're just about done with questions at the moment. Apologies if I have skipped you out. I have missed your question amongst the many that we had there. If you do, please put your hand up. Just as we finish off today, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Paul Grant for running today's event and for Daniel for being our guest speaker. Thank you all for joining us. Like I say, a survey link will come out to you shortly. If you could just take 2 minutes of your time to complete that, that would really be helpful. We look forward to you joining us at our next event. An invitation will be followed shortly with that. Thank you all today. Thank you guys for taking part, the presenters. I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Okay, thanks everybody. Have a good day. Bye.